most people think of it, they think of comfort, safety, a place to belong. They think of their loved ones. They think of protection and sanctuary. Home doesn't mean those things for everyone. Some of us grew up in places where we didn't have that taken for granted comfort and security and safety. Some of us grew up in spaces where home was synonymous with threat, danger, and alienation. Home doesn't come easy for me. I grew up in an abusive home with a father who would regularly beat me. I grew up in a space where I had to be constantly on alert. There was no place of safety for me, no sanctuary. That loss, that absence of the notion of home is felt constantly. Whenever there's a TV show that shows family coming together, whenever there's a horror movie and the big threat is some monster outside the house, whenever I hear friends' traditions from growing up, these aren't relatable to me. They aren't relatable to any of us who have grown up with abuse and violence. It took me a long time to realize that others had houses that were safe spaces for them, where they didn't have to be on alert at all times. It took me a long time to realize that those TV depictions of people's homes were normal, and that people could grow up without the constant threat of violence, that people could be themselves without worrying about being hit. It's been over 25 years since we escaped my biological father. It seems it should have been long enough for me to develop a new sense of home, a new sense of family. But that little kid that I used to be is still here with me, still lingering. I still feel those fears, uncertainties, and dangers. They shape my experience of the world around me. I still need to sit with my back to the wall or I feel unsafe. I still have to be on edge with everyone. And now that I have a house of my own, I still have to deal with my constant fear that my partner will somehow become abusive. And yet, now that I have a house of my own, I'm also insecure about people entering this space. I feel uncomfortable with people coming into my house, especially strangers, which is tough when there are repairs to be done around the home. The trauma is deeper than the scars and takes even more energy to cover up. Post-traumatic stress seems inadequate for the damage I carry with me and the distorted lens it applies to my perceptions of the world around me. Stress doesn't cover it, and the post part of it is debatable since it's so very present and so very incomplete. It affects every part of my life. The constant feeling of being at threat means that I sweat constantly, that I'm always on alert, and that I can't relax. Most people don't notice the visual indicators of PTSD. I act and I hide my symptoms well. I perform normalcy every hour of every day, presenting myself as someone who is untraumatized. This form of hiding is a survival mechanism, as much as hiding in the basement was a survival mechanism for dealing with my abusive father. Our society doesn't like to see trauma. It likes to present the idea that we get over it and become normal. We don't get over trauma. Studies have shown that it literally changes our brain patterns. Instead, we learn to hide it. We learn to fake being normal until we almost believe ourselves to have gotten rid of our trauma. It stays with us as a passenger on our journey. It haunts us. It shapes us. My trauma and I are all bound together, tied up in a ball so it's impossible to see where I end and where my trauma begins. Is there even a me without my trauma?